Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Smart Hustle Podcast, where we motivate and educate you to grow your business so you can live the lives you want, helping your small business, but so you can grow your family, support your community, and live the life you want. My name is Ramon Ray. Thanks for listening again to the Smart Hustle Podcast at smarthustle.com. Based on what? Oh, yes. Based on what I've been told, this is going to be what they just said, the best interview ever in the entire planet, because we have two amazing rock stars here today. That would be Jackie. And Jackie, I should have asked how to pronounce your last name. So I'm going to make a guess, and then you're going to tell me if I'm right or wrong. If I had to guess, Jackie, I'd say we have Jackie Resis, but I think that's wrong. Jackie, how do you
it's wrong. It's Reese's, like a peanut butter cup.
Of course. So I'm going to do that. We have Jackie Resis here, who's the author of the brand new book, Self-Made Boss, co-author and formerly worked at Square. And we have Lauren Weinberg from Square as well. And she's also the co-author of the book, Self-Made Boss. Jackie, thanks for being here. How are things in your world?
They're awesome. Hard to complain, to be honest with you. Things are doing well.
It is indeed. We have a lot to be blessed about and a lot to be thankful for. Lauren, how are things in your world? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Everything is great on my end as well. Thank you so much for having us today.
Awesome. You're welcome. It's always good to talk to people who power the small business ecosystem. So for me and my audience, you all are rock stars, especially both of you, one of you currently, one of you just formerly working with Square. But let's dive into it. Lauren, we have this brand new book out. I have it here, Self-Made Boss. I hope people buy multiple copies and hand them to their friend. The subline, I think it's called in English, says advice, hacks, and lessons from small business owners. Lauren, I'll turn to you first. Give us a summary from your point of view. What's inside the book? And more importantly than what's inside the book, I'm sure this is taking your lessons learned from so many people. Overview that for us, Lauren.
Yeah. So what's inside the book is basically a guide to how to start, run, grow, manage, transition out of your business. We cover every topic from how to get started, your operations, your business plan, marketing, hiring, HR, navigating roadblocks, transitioning out of your business, like you name it, it is in here. We interviewed around 35 entrepreneurs from all over the country in all different industries, from all different backgrounds, and then complemented that with expert interviews. So think about your legal expert or your photography expert or your marketing expert or your HR expert. And you can read the book all the way through, or you can read it if you just, have one thing that's top of mind for you right now. Maybe that's how you think about hiring. You can go right to that chapter and read it, just that chapter. So you can read it cover to cover. You can go to the chapters that you need. At the end of every chapter, we give you like 5 or 6 things for you to think about. So how do you take what you just heard from these business owners' perspectives? And I think that's the main thing about this book is it's told from the perspective of what these business owners have experienced and learned throughout the years. And then we sort of turn it on you in the end and say, here's how to think about the things that we just talked about and how they might apply to your business so that you can take their learnings and think about how you might apply it to your own.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. I'm excited again for my audience to get their hands on it. And by the way, the website is baller. Website looks pretty darn good. Jackie, from your perspective, unpack it from your side. What would you say, your version, as it were, right, of what's inside Self-Made Boss? What excites you the most about it?
Yeah. So what excites me the most is that there is a dearth of information available for small businesses that really is pragmatic and useful, immediately applicable for them to start to think about any element of their business. And this guide becomes that source for information to help them start, run, and grow their business at any size. And so the way it's written, as Lauren said, you could go chapter by chapter and think through frameworks of expertise provided by people who are experts in their field, see how they apply it to some of the businesses that are mentioned and talked about in the narrative of this book, and then immediately be able to have that aha moment and go, oh, interesting. Like, I see how that could work and I should rethink the following dynamics. And so it's completely understandable, which I love, versus theoretical. And And it's also told through the eyes of comparable businesses or even businesses that are slightly bigger that you might aspire to. But, the people who've used it for themselves have all taken tips that are super pragmatic from the book, which feels great to see the application of it in the real world. And so, that's how I think about the book.
I love it. And I'm excited again for my audience to see it. I'm curious, Jackie, I'll turn back to you. Can you talk about maybe pull apart one of the tips, and we'll go through that in a few minutes. We'll keep talking about that. But anything, again, I'm cheating. I have the book in front of me and I really love it. I'm looking at it right now, just going through the table of contents. We have finance, operations, legal matters, creating a business plan, which is important, taking the first step. Pull out maybe one of those things, Jack, if you wish. And from your years of experience, what's one tip you're like, Ramon, especially representing Square, right? You and Lauren see gazillions of small businesses as a collective team per year, per month. So Jackie, for you, what's that one or two tips?
Yeah,
You say, Ramon, I'm hearing this all the time. Why does it sound
I'll take an easy one around
Okay.
getting credit, because I think it's really hard for small businesses to get credit. There are two main ways to get credit. One is traditional financing that could either be bank financing or credit card.
Mhm.
The second is trying to get financing through some of the tech tools you use with online financing. If you're a bigger company, getting traditional financing is usually the route that has the lowest cost. It takes a long time because you have to develop a lot of paperwork, but it's usually something that could yield a bigger loan, say $100,000 or more. And if you think about that, if you're getting a $100,000 loan, it's typically applicable to a business that does $1 million in sales or more of that size. But if you're below that, you might need $5,000, $10,000. Oftentimes that's done through credit cards. That's okay if you can get a business credit card. Often you can't. And often they have incredibly high interest rates of 30% or more, roughly 25 to 30%. And so credit cards are great to have. It's like a line. Everyone should get them. I totally recommend having it, putting it aside for safekeeping, so long as you're able to get it. The second piece is looking at financing through some of the tools you use online. I think this financing is incredibly flexible. You should absolutely think about whether you have access to it in your accounting software, your tax software, your point of sale software. And these things typically aggregate up your revenue or your cash flow and are able to predict how much of a loan you can pay back, and then provide you real-time loan offers into your business that at any given moment you can click on a loan offer, have it immediately available. Why is that important that you have this kind of tool available to you? Because you never know on a Sunday morning when your coffee machine in a coffee shop is going to fail.
That's right.
And you need $2,000 for the Italian espresso machine. And so I would look and see what tools you're using and make sure that you have tools that have these kinds of products available to you. And they're now becoming more pervasive in, as I said, accounting software, point of sale software. And it's something that I would consider when you're shopping for those kinds of tools as to whether this is available. It could mean life or death to your business. Cash flow really matters. This is a great way to have cash flow available.
Yeah, I think that is powerful. What I'm hearing, again, the credit card's good to have. Everybody should have one or more. Make sure you watch them and have the best one for you. But two, there's tools available. And you're right. If you're using any of the popular online services, especially some of the larger brands, Square included, that are helping small businesses, all of them are more and more infusing in it. Hey, click here and grow. So Jackie, I think that's powerful indeed. Lauren, from your perspective, talk to us again about some of the insights in that business in the book. What are one or two things you like, Ramon? Here was one of my favorite, as it were, portions or a tip from your experience being at Square and what we're finding in the book, Self-Made Boss. Talk to us, Lauren.
Yeah, so it's hard to pick one, honestly, because there's so many good ones in here, but I'll talk about marketing because that's a subject near and dear to my heart, and also something that we know is very top of mind for small business owners. And there's a couple things that we get asked all the time. One is, when should I start thinking about my marketing? And I think the answer to that question is it's really right away, right? Every single experience, touch point that somebody has with your products, with your services, with your physical location, if you have one. These are all opportunities to create an impression of the brand. And the best kind of marketing is the free kind of marketing. And that's what happens when people really have an amazing experience. Like if they love your food, if you have an awesome service provider that, somebody really loves, they're going to talk about you. And so I would say that's like the first place to get started. But then the second question is like, well, when should I start thinking about posting on social channels? And should I be on all of them? How often should I post? And I think this is something that is a very overwhelming topic for a lot of people. So I'll talk about a couple of tips
Sure.
from the book, which is you don't need to be on all of them. I think that the primary thing is really understanding where your audience is. So understanding where your audience spends time, and also what kind of business do you have? If you have a food business, you definitely should be on Instagram, because Instagram is a very visual platform and people love to see pictures of food. And there's lots of tips in the book from photographers on how to shoot food in the best way to really just like make it look the most appealing. If you are a trainer, you probably need to be on TikTok and a video platform so people can see the kinds of exercises and things that you're doing. And so it comes down to where your audience spends time, the kind of business that you have. And we talk in the book about breaking it down really into something that can just feel really palatable, because obviously when you run a business, your biggest like resource constraint is time. There's just not enough time in the day for all the things that you have to do. And so I think if you can break down your social media strategy to, the primary platforms, maybe it's one or two, and develop a content calendar where it's, 3 times a week you're going to post. On Mondays, you're going to talk about your products, your services, the backstory of why you're in business. People love that. Everybody wants to hear about you, why you do what you do, why it's different or better than what's out there already, and like develop that personal connection with your customers, because that is going to drive loyalty and repeat visitors and repeat customers. So that's number one. You could also spend other times talking about your staff, right? Really highlighting your staff and maybe what's your hiring philosophy. If you're all about hiring diversity, that's something that people want to hear about. And then, on the third day of the week, you could talk about promotion, sales, community events. And I think if you can break it down into something like that, and even during your busiest times, you could actually pre-write your content. And then, okay, I'm going onto Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter today, and these are the things that I'm doing, and it's just done. And you don't have to sit down in front of your computer and have just like this paralysis of, oh my God, I don't know where to start or which platform to be on or what I would even say.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And Lauren, a follow-up question, then I'm going to turn to you, Jackie, for the same question. But I'm curious, Lauren, and thank you for sharing those insights, is that and it's more rhetorical, more discussion point. Many small businesses I talk to, and I talk of tens of thousands, probably, I don't think it's hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands a year, feel overwhelmed. Absolutely overwhelmed. And I think you mentioned one thing, Lauren, you talked about time management. They're probably overwhelmed because they got the cat, the dog, the kids, the husband, the wife, the this, that, the other, soccer practice. They got to eat, sleep, use the bathroom. Woo! And then you got to build a business. So I think they feel overwhelmed. And then two, just the lack of information, meaning it's there. You can do a quick online search, props to SCORE, who helps small businesses, and books like this, but still so many like Ramon. I feel overwhelmed. So it's not really an answer I'm looking for, Lauren, but just talk about that. Talk to the small business owner out there who's just like, oh, I'm frustrated. What do you say to them? What do you say to your customers? Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the most common thing you hear from everybody. And also, before I went to Square, I ran my own business, and Jackie's also run her own businesses and is doing that right now. And so we both have a lot of empathy for what this feels like, because you get into business because you have a passion or something you're really good at, or a hobby or strength. And all of a sudden you find yourself wearing every single hat that exists, right? You're the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the chief legal officer. I mean, you are the human resources expert, you are everything. And you also, most of these people are managing other components outside of their work life, just their life, their families, whatever other obligations they have. And so it is really overwhelming. And so I would say, if I put my Square hat on for a second, I would say one of the things that I would say to somebody who's feeling that way is to really not be scared of technology. I think this is a common theme that we hear a lot. And it was interesting because during the pandemic, we saw this like massive acceleration of small businesses adopting technology tools because they had to. And so I think that that was amazing, because what would normally have taken 3 years happened in 3 weeks for some business owners. Like,
Right.
got to get online, got to get curbside pickup and delivery. That's probably something people were thinking about for a while. But the truth is that, you and Jackie were talking about this a little bit before, but there's a lot of companies today that really care about and are in service of the small business community. And adopting technology is something that will really save time. I would say the other thing is, like, right now, staffing is a huge concern for business owners. And so there's a lot of ways that technology could ease the pain of having short staff. If you have a restaurant, for example, having QR codes for your menus, if you're short staffed on servers, that's a huge save for you. If you can run your payroll from your point of sale system instead of hiring an accountant who's going to sit in the back room to run payroll for you, also a huge time saver for you. And so I think that's the thing, is that technology can feel really scary. A lot of business owners like to have full control over everything that they're doing. And I think it feels like you're giving up a bit of control when you're adopting technology. But I do think that that adaptation is really what's going to help a lot of businesses get through any kind of hard time and sort of challenges, because it just means that they have more resources at their disposal and more time back to do other things.
Absolutely. And I'm going to, before I turn to you, Jackie, this is kind of going to sound like a dad joke, but I'm going to go with it. You mentioned about 3 weeks and et cetera. I think many of us didn't even know how to spell QR code before the pandemic. So that was kind of a corny joke, but QR, like, how do you spell QR code? So that was that. Let's move on though. Before I wreck the entire Smart Hustle show, everybody can go to smarthustle.com to listen to interviews like this. Jackie, what are your thoughts on this aspect of business owners, especially smaller business owners, feeling that overwhelmed? What are your thoughts?
I think there are two ways we address it in the book. One is talking a bit about mindfulness and coaching and where to get advice. And there are some sections on those two topics and how important they are. The second dimension is thinking about when to hire help. And so oftentimes business owners will take it upon themselves to have the burden of their entire business on their shoulders, when in reality, there is a right time to hire support and to explore other people to help you in areas of your business where maybe you're not good at it, or maybe it's just a time sink. The relative cost for you is so high for you to pursue that particular activity. It could be bookkeeping or finance, usually is the one that's everyone's personal challenge. And so we go through a framework for how to think what's the right time to hire. And that's usually the time that can unlock this either great time to think, great time to pursue your craft. And I think there's a bit of guilt associated with it. Like, you could either be making that money, but you only have so much time. And so you have to be able to be very thoughtful and disciplined about whether you should be spending your time pursuing your craft. And that's the highest and best use of your time, and getting someone else to support you. And that's often one of the biggest challenges small business owners face, because they don't know how to weigh that for themselves relative to the expense or the revenue opportunity. So I think it requires a little bit of exploring to figure out what the right equation is to get the balance right. And I also think it'll evolve over time. It's not always the same based on how your business is growing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jackie. And my friend Seth Godin, I'm sure both of you may have known him or even had him at some events, but famous marketer, a friend of mine, he talks about how small businesses more so deceptively think they're the cheapest person. I fall into that. I only have a small team of 5 people running Smart Hustle, give or take, depending on the day. But I can get caught doing WordPress coding or something all day, and I'll be like, it's 4 a.m. I've been doing this myself. I should have my team or hire somebody to do it. So I think, Jackie, you're right. That's a big dilemma, is that, do I do it myself and think it's cheaper? Or, as I say, hiring for expertise or for time. So, Jackie, I think that's very true as well. Also, I'm curious, and I don't know if you're able to, Jackie and Lauren, but I'll turn to you first, Jackie. Any particular business owner that stands out in the book, whether metaphorically or reality? No. But can you talk about anyone that comes to mind, that who's inside there?
There are so many. Elon Paso's store
Okay.
in New York, got an amazing oyster farmer. You've got a cheese creator
Okay.
in Utah. I think the one though that I find to be really interesting from like a learning point of view was Shabika's Olive Oil in California. It's a family-owned business, multi-generational. And in the pandemic, they changed, sorry about this
Okay.
cough, I can't get rid of it.
I was going to try to send you a Halls or something, but I
No,
just
I can't
that
get rid of
couldn't Send
it.
it to the link.
I can't get rid of it.
Well, thanks for being here. You sound great. Thanks for being here.
But they changed their packaging in the pandemic in order to take advantage of shipping costs. And they thought about their workflow from an operational point of view and evolved what they were doing in a really creative, smart way to respond to the change in buyer demand of olive oil in the middle of the pandemic, where now people were more willing to change their behavior. So in his mind, he saw a platform shift in consumer demand. And then he also saw how his workflow could evolve by changing the shape of his olive oil bottles. And I think that's kind of genius. Like he
Yes.
really explored the basics of his business at a moment in crisis. But the long-term ramifications of that are incredible to his business in terms of making it more profitable, eliminating breakage, just being overall smart about how he manages his operations. So I love those stories.
Yeah, I love that, Jackie. And what I love to, and I'll turn to you, Lauren, in a second here, is that was nothing about the finances that we talk about, which is an important pillar, nothing necessarily about the marketing, which are two pillars of small business, but that's just thinking, how can I innovate? And I guess he saved him when he did more. So Jackie, I love that. Lauren, anybody come to mind for you, whether again, metaphorically or reality that you can think of, in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jackie. It's always hard to pick one or two because there's so many incredible business owners in the book.
Yes.
But I'll talk about two. I would say one is Keith Miller. He owns Bubbly Paws, which is a dog grooming service. And the reason I'm going to call him out is because I think in this time that we have right now, like people call it the Great Resignation or whatever they call it, we know a lot of businesses are suffering from staffing shortages. And now more than ever, small business owners have to think a lot about culture and what they're going to offer to their employees. And so I'm going to call out Keith because he was very ahead of his time in this way. He was giving his employees reviews every 6 months. He was thinking about ways that he could make their work life a little bit easier on a daily basis, including small things like providing like a soft cushion for his dog groomers to stand on to make their job more comfortable. And he really thought about the benefits component of the job. And I think this is something that a lot of business owners today are finding that they need to think about a lot more, offering benefits, offering sick leave. And so I think Keith was really ahead of his time in that way by thinking a lot about the culture, about the kind of employees he wants to attract. And then the second person I would call out is Letitia Hankey. She is a Black female roofer in California, in Northern California. And so what's really incredible about her is obviously, she is a minority in her industry, and she struggled a lot with people not wanting to work with her because she was a Black woman. And this is something that she talked about in the Roblox chapter as being really difficult. And she would go to visit potential customers who would turn her down and say pretty racist and terrible things to her. And she told us the story that's in the beginning of one of the chapters about how she drove around the corner, like cried her eyes out, then went back to the office and decided that she was going to put her face on the website so that anybody that was calling her would know who they were getting. And so I think just this idea of really owning who you are and making sure that everybody knows who you are and really being proud of your identity in an industry that is maybe not so welcoming of people like you. And so I think she is incredibly brave. She is just someone that Jackie and I have used in a couple of other speaking engagements because she is just so full of wisdom. She's incredibly articulate, and she is probably the most optimistic and positive person that I have ever met. And so you should probably have her on your show because she is amazing, and everybody who meets her wants to be friends with her immediately. And so she's also someone who just really stands out, I think, to Jackie and I both.
Absolutely.
As an incredible superstar.
Yeah, it's ARS Roofing and Solar and Roofing in
I love
Oakland.
it. Y'all heard
She's
that?
great.
So Lauren just slipped in a recommendation for the next Smart Hustle podcast. She just smoothly slipped in a person. I love it, Lauren. I love it. And you're right. And she's probably a double minority. I remember, and I think we all have biases. Some people are really nasty, terrible people. Most people are not. I think it's just how we grew up, what we're comfortable with. I was working, Lauren and Jackie at the United Nations, and we hired a programmer. And she came in the office like dressed to the nines. I thought she worked for Vogue magazine. So when I saw her, I'm like, my mind said, no. She can't be a programmer. She has to have glasses and like have a t-shirt that has a programming symbol on it. She can't have a matching handbag and heels. But it was just, that's what I had the image in my mind, but she was like crushing it. So that's a silly example, but listen, good for her. And I think that what a double whammy it was actually, being female and Black in the roofing industry, it's mostly male dominated. So this is amazing. Jackie and Lauren, before we end, I'll turn to you, Jackie, if you don't mind first. Anything I didn't ask, anything you wanted to add? I have time, but this has been so good. Self-Made Boss. It's a book I highly recommend. And beyond the book itself, take action. Look at the insights in the book. So I'm so glad Lauren and Jackie, you were here. But Jackie, anything I didn't ask, anything you wanted to add before we conclude the talk?
The one piece we didn't talk about that I think really matters is developing a culture for a company, even if you're tiny. And you should really think about what your business projects to your employees and to your customers. And is there something you should change in order to either speak to who you are or who your company is trying to be? But it doesn't matter whether you're a tiny company of 2 people, the culture really matters. And I think that's a draw for employees right now, is to have a purpose and to have a company that they like working for. And oftentimes really small companies don't think of it, but I do think it really matters how you treat people, how you come across, how you kind of form a bond together, even as a tiny company, to say, this is what we want to be. And our benefits are going to mean that, the way we treat people, the consistency of that. And I think it's worth some time to really sit down with your team and think through that, no matter what your size. And I think that's something that's sometimes forgotten. So that's one. I'd add one more, which
Please.
is design really matters. Photography, your image, those things really matter to who you are. I think they're consistent with your culture. But I would really spend the time thinking about that as well, because you can go online and get access to resources that can help you, and it's worth investing the time.
Yeah, you are so true, Jack. Even for my small team, I remind people, yes, I'm the face of the brand. If people like or hate me, whatever it is, I hope more of them like me. But I remind the team, my admin or people who are working with our clients, I'm like, listen, smile, brush your teeth, say please and thank you. They already do that. But even though we're small, I remind them, you're an extension of Ramon and Smart Hustle. Lauren, anything I didn't ask you or anything you wanted to add, anything you wanted to mention? This has been such a great discussion. I'm so glad you're here with us, Lauren.
I think Jackie covered most of it. The only other thing I would maybe add is that, and we touched on this a little bit, Ramon, but I think that it can feel really lonely to be a small business owner. And so part of what we want this book to do is to create this sense of community. And so I think, I know I definitely felt this way when I ran my business. Like, I spend a lot of time by myself. And I think the whole sort of genesis of the book is that there's a lot of people out there, millions and millions of people who are going through the same challenges. And for everybody, it sort of feels like you're reinventing the wheel every time. And the reason why we wrote this book is so that we could put some of those things out there to make it a little bit easier, to basically take the insights from all of these millions of business owners who have literally done the same exact things that a lot of people are struggling through right now, and to say, here's what I did, here's what worked for me. And so I would just say, I think that there's this idea here of just, how do we create a better sense of community and sharing insights and learnings? Because there's a lot of common themes like that you've mentioned that we hear all the time. And so, yes, the book is part of answering that question. And I think the other thing is just like, how do you even create that community within your community, and get people together and just make sure that you're really supporting each other? I think now more than ever, people really want to support their local communities. I think they maybe took them for granted a little bit. And then the pandemic came and all of a sudden people thought, wow, like, I don't want anything to happen to the main street in my town, because that would mean that my town wouldn't be the same anymore. And so I still think that there's just this like desire to root for the underdog and to really see local businesses thrive. And so I would just say, like, the things that, people can do to really encourage that sense of community. The book is one thing, but certainly there's lots of other ways that people can get together to foster that sense of community.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We've had Jackie Reeses and Lauren Weinberg. Thank you for joining me on the Smart Hustle podcast. If you're hearing the sound of my voice or you're watching this video and you like what you heard, we love a 5-star review. If you're hearing the sound of my voice and you're watching this video and you don't like what you heard, I love a 5-star review. This is Ramon Ray of smarthustle.com. You can find content like this at smarthustle.com, where all we want to do is one thing, baby. We just want to help you grow your business so you can live the life you want to provide for your family and uplift your community. And with that, again, Jackie, thank you so much. And Lauren, thank you so much. And I hope to check all of you out at the next podcast at smarthustle.com.